Welcome back to the Silent Plus podcast. My name is Josh Watford, and across the desks from me is
John Nicholson's here.
All right, this is a special episode.
Indeed.
What I mean special, it's a one-off episode. We're not doing a series. We will start
Although we may
a
need to do a
series.
series on this. I don't know. We'll see.
That's very possible, but they'll probably have to wait until you get back from your
Right.
sabbatical.
That's exactly
which
right.
this is about. And
Right.
so we felt like it was necessary just to have a short conversation, an extended conversation outside of what's already been
Sure.
discussed about your sabbatical and just the topic of sabbatical in general.
Yeah.
And so we decided podcast would be a good avenue to do that in.
Yeah.
And so it's just me and you here. So we can just dive in. So John, what is a sabbatical?
A sabbatical, it's the root of it is a Sabbath. That's the root word of that.
I don't speak Hebrew.
I get it. Me either. It's another conversation for another day. But it is an extended period of rest after a period of extreme exertion, it's a new thing for me. Obviously, it's a new thing for our church family. It's something I've heard about. It's kind of one of those unicorns or Sasquatches out there. You thought maybe they existed, but you'd never really had encountered one in the wild. That kind of a thing.
Or aliens.
Yeah, those things.
They're back in the news.
Right, they're back in the news.
Anyways.
But we had actually begun as a church talking about this pre-COVID.
Right.
And Vanessa and the church graciously agreed to partner and send Vanessa and I to the Holy Land, and as part of that, and we were on track to do that, and then COVID hit, and so all that just got sidelined for a while. Mm-hmm. And we resurrected the conversation early this year, I guess. It may have been a little before that, but I know in January with our deacons we began this conversation again, and formally walked through that process with our deacons in May, and then our church family and our church conference in June, July, whenever that one was. But just talking about and laying out a plan, a process for an extended period of rest, of break for me. Although I still laugh when I presented it to the deacons. Roger Harper spoke up and said, "This doesn't look like a break. This looks like a different kind of work." But
right.
Which is okay. That's because a different kind of work is rest in many ways.
Yeah.
But it is that taking of a break, and there are biblical principles that lie behind this. God rests in creation, so it's built into creation. He dedicates the Sabbath and makes it holy. Then even giving the people of Israel instructions when they come into the land, there was to be that seventh year Sabbath, and then in the seventh year, that year of Jubilee, where there's this extended rest, not only just for the land, but for the people. Slaves are set free, and work is set aside, and that's such it seems almost heretical in our American culture to talk about not working like that.
Yeah. Well, people, you think about Chick-fil-A.
yeah, exactly.
One of the most profitable companies in the country, and they're the only one in those top ones that take a day off.
Right.
But so what you're saying is this idea of rest isn't some novel idea that somebody just recently came up with.
Right.
It's something that is really just built into the fabric of creation itself.
Right.
And we see that on the seventh day.
Yeah.
Sabbath meaning seventh. And God just taking that Sabbath and He consecrates it and He makes it holy.
Right.
And so this rest that God entered into, He invites us to enter into as well.
Right.
And whereas what your extended period of rest in, quote unquote rest, in October is different than what God did on the seventh day.
Absolutely.
It's meant to mirror that.
Right.
And it's something that we should be doing on a regular basis on some scale.
Sure.
Right. Now, yeah, we can get into the biblical theology of Sabbath on another podcast.
Yeah, and like I said, I think
it's incredibly important.
Yeah, I think that is a worthwhile conversation for us to pursue because it is so contrary to our understanding of what a productive life is.
Yeah.
And our culture says if you're not running faster, working harder, getting up earlier, stay up later than everybody else, then you're falling behind. Now, I even had this experience, and I've shared this with you personally on a number of occasions. When we were in Atlanta, it was a very different church culture there, and the church was exploding. It was massive growth. It was exciting. There were great things that were happening, but it was killing my family. I mean, it was not unusual for me to get up before the kids left or leave before the kids got up, and for me to get home sometimes after the kids had gone to bed. That was not an unusual occurrence, and Vanessa finally stopped me and said, if you don't change something, you're going to come home and your kids aren't going to know who you are. And that was just a aha moment. And I had a conversation in the aftermath of that with my pastor at that time, who I love and appreciate. Learned so much from Mike, but this was one of the things I learned, that this is not the way, and needed to reset. But had the conversation with him about changing that work habit. I was going to commit to working 50 hours a week, and I was going home with the understanding that there would be events and crises and those kinds of things that come up, and that went without saying. But his response to me at that moment was, well, here that will be barely keeping your nose above water, but we'll give it a try. And he was gracious, and we worked through some things, and I tried and made some change, but it was just evident that was just not a culture that was going to allow me to step back and be present with my family. And I had that conversation with Mike in the aftermath of it, and just said, look, I plan to be in ministry a long time, and lo and behold, I have been in ministry a long time. Yep. Said, but I want to be a dad to my kids one time, and I don't want to miss those things. And so, and I'm so grateful that I did that. But again, there is this idea of you've got to work longer and harder in order to truly be successful. Well, God says no. To be successful, you've got to rely on me.
That's right.
And again, that runs contrary. It runs counter to the grain of our lives. And this is going to be a challenge for me. I think you as the church, y'all are going to be fine. Y'all are going to thrive. I'm not concerned at all about, things are going to fall. No, I know better. Because y'all are healthy, and Josh, your leadership makes the opportunity for me to have the sabbatical very easy. Because the church knows you, they love you, they trust your leadership, and you're a fantastic preacher, and so they're going to be well fed, and all of the things. There'll be a seamless handoff of pastoral duties during that month. So that's a blessing. And church family, you ought to, during sabbatical, you just affirm and pray for Josh and encourage him as he's stepping in there, because it does make this very easy. But my bigger concern is how am I going to disconnect from it? Because this is just part of my day to day, and how will I be able to? Vanessa's still real skeptical. She knows me really well,
Yeah. Well, yeah, we won't burn anything down here, but yeah, we're thinking about you. Well, before we get to that, so I did jot down some notes.
No way.
Before we hit record.
That's amazing.
And one of the things that we did want to talk about, and I thought we would talk about this right after we got done talking about what a sabbatical is. Let's talk about what it's not.
Okay.
All right. So before we get into the personal things about your Sabbath, what is a Sabbath not?
Well, first and foremost, just for ultimate clarity, this is not a job search opportunity for me. I've had so many of our church members say, you're not looking for another place to go. And the clear answer to that is no, I am not. This is not, I'm not going to be preaching other places, none of those kinds of things. It is not, in fact, it is just the opposite of that. This is a season, and we'll kind of get into this a little bit more when we talk a little bit about the plan that the deacons and church have signed off on for me to be a part of. But this is a season for me to really intently focus and think through what the next season of ministry here at Siloam may look like. for me personally, but also for us corporately as a church family. And so first and foremost, I ain't looking for another church to go to. Okay,
well, I'm glad.
Well, I am too. I'm really grateful for that. But other things that it's not. I'm not going to be eating popcorn and watching movies all day long every day for 31 days. This isn't a time where I'm going to be doing nothing. Partly because that's just not how I'm wired. You
go crazy.
I will have to be. But I do plan to try to entice some fish into a boat with some regularity through that time.
As you should.
Vanessa's got a few honeydews that have been pushed to the side that I'll have some time to do those kinds of things, and that's good. That's healthy stuff. But it will be unplugging from the day-to-day press of we got to plan that committee meeting. I've got to go see such and such in the hospital, or I've got to Sunday comes around pretty regularly here, and all of those kinds of things. I get to lay them aside for a bit. So that's another thing that it's not me just sitting around doing nothing, and I come back with 40 extra pounds and bad cholesterol numbers. So I don't know, what other myths have you heard, or other thoughts have you heard?
No, I guess one of the things that we talked about beforehand as well is, and this ties into what it is as well as what it's not, is really just, well, I don't even know if it thought, I don't know, I'm just going to say it. That some people ask, well, that's not something that I get at my job,
right? And
so how is this, what is special, I guess that's the word, what's special about this as far as the job of a pastor?
Yeah.
That I don't know how to word it,
yeah.
But how is this different?
But that's a really good question, and it's an important distinction. It's not something we as pastors talk a lot about, simply because it's just part of the job. It's part of what it's part of what you sign up for. And there have been a number of fascinating articles that have come out recently. One by Max Lucado. We'll put this out in the show notes here, so you can track that down a little later. But just kind of talking about where he was. He was America's pastor, but things were falling apart around him, and he needed a season to hit that reset, and gratefully he did. There was another pastor that had come out and got a lot of response on social media, just very forthcoming about where he was, and he was actually leaving ministry at that point, and that's part of the deal. I've just read a book by Mackey is his last name. I can't remember his first name right now, but anyway, he talks about the unique role of a pastor, the unique pressures of a pastor. He says most families in your church live life on a three-legged stool. You've got your family life, your work life, and your spiritual life. And if one of those legs wobbles or one of those legs gets compromised, you have the other two legs to lean on. But in the life of a pastor, those three legs are usually merged into one. Your family life, your work life, and your spiritual life all kind of get wrapped into one thing. And so and you can imagine that. I thought it was just really a cogent illustration, because you can imagine sitting on a three-legged stool is a whole lot easier than balancing on a one-legged stool.
Yep.
And it just requires this constant on, if you will, this constant present of, I've got to be doing this. And it just takes its toll over time. And there have been all the studies post-COVID that has taken a tremendous toll on pastors. I've had conversations with both friends and with folks in ministry that I'm not really familiar with, but those are common refrains.
Yep.
And it's not just because of COVID, but the things that changed societally during that season as well, that have brought incredible additional pressures to the work and task of ministry. So all those things, they begin to add up, and they're even calling it, what do they call it? The great
de-churching.
Yeah, the great de-churching. Where I think something like, if I remember, I think Tom Rainer said that 42% of pastors have thought about leaving the ministry in the last 6 months. I get that. Hadn't been me. Vanessa told me, said, you're not good for anything else, so you better stick with it. So I'm not looking to leave. But burnout is a real issue.
Yep.
And then the other side of it, and really the more dangerous part of that, is flame out, having some moral failure. Thankfully I'm not there, But you hear of those kinds of things, and there's our yard maintenance folks right there helping us out on the podcast. But that's part of the reason for a sabbatical, so that you can take that breath. And to draw it back to that original question that we were talking about there is, why don't other folks get them? Well, again, I think that may be a topic for another conversation, because maybe this should be more common across the board than it is. And it's interesting, some of the studies that are coming out, even in big business, REI and I think Apple and some of the other notable businesses that you would recognize, are offering sabbaticals for their, and of course they are not spiritual in their nature. It's just take a break from what you're doing, go do something else, so that you can come back and be sharp again. They are recognizing, and it's always funny. I get this snarky little smile on my face when science catches up with Scripture.
Exactly.
And this is another one of those places where we are designed in such a way that we should rest, but we don't rest very well.
Let's move into talking about your sabbatical in particular.
Okay.
So, what is the plan?
Well, the big broad outline of it is this. Week 1 of October, I'll pretty much kind of staycation, take care of some of those honeydews and those kinds of things that are on my list. I have a family wedding down at the beach, so I'll go suffer and put my toes in the sand, probably eat some good seafood and that sort of thing. Yeah, I know, it's tough. I'm sorry. But then, really, the core of this, those middle 2 weeks of October, and we'll publish this list out. A couple of folks have asked for it, and I've given it to them. But I have arranged conversations, I think, with 11 men. I think that's right. Maybe 10. Anyway, these are our pastors that have been in their positions of ministry for 15 plus years, some of them 20 plus. Mm-hmm. Roland Brown, he's at Golden Springs Baptist in Anniston. He's been there over 20 years, and he's still, he's probably got another 10 years in him there, I would guess. But very effective. Church has thrived under his leadership. So I'll have a conversation with him about what that kind of long-term ministry looks like in one place and navigating some of that. Then Patsy Pagan arranged a conversation with her former pastor from Nashville, Mike Glenn, from Brentwood Baptist Church. Mike just retired. You want to talk about apples and orange kind of conversation. He's pastor of one of the largest churches, or just retired pastor of one of the largest churches in the Southern Baptist Convention. 7,000 or 8,000 in worship on any given Sunday, multiple campuses. Yeah, I mean, huge staffs, all that sort of stuff. So, some may think, well, what in the world does a guy like that have to say to something, somebody that's pastoring Siloam Baptist Church in Marion? There's going to be some information I'll get from him. Mm-hmm. Talking to Gary Fenton, he's was a pastor at Dawson Memorial. I can get into the weeds, but anyway, I'll be having conversations with these pastors. One of the most intriguing ones for me is I'll be meeting with Josh Vance, who is now the pastor at Stapleton Baptist Church. I got in touch with Josh because I was trying to get in touch with Alan Lawhon. Alan was his predecessor there at Stapleton, and Alan served at Stapleton over 20 years, retired, stayed in the church, is now a deacon in that church, which I still can't really wrap my head around. But I'll be sitting down with the two of them together and just talking about what that relationship has looked like. And Josh was very affirming of it. It's been one of the best things because the relationship's been so good, and Alan's been so supportive. And so just trying to ferret out some of those things. But those middle 2 weeks are going to be engaged in me going and meeting over breakfast or lunch with these men for a couple of hours and asking, tell me the good, the bad, the ugly. Tell me where the potholes are. What would you have done different? Getting their wisdom from their experience, mm-hmm. and trying to collect some of that up so that I can begin to say, well, this is what could potentially be down the road, here. And so, because I want to lead well into whatever is next here at Siloam. I want to lead actively. Somebody was asking me about it and said, I could put it on cruise control here. I've got a whole lot of sermons I've written over a whole lot of years.
Right.
I can go dust those babies off and have at it. And but I don't want to do that. I don't want to just hit cruise control. And I want to lead well. I want to lead, and part of that is having that wisdom, but also part of it is getting my feet back under me in this season. because I am weary.
One of the critiques that people have of leaders who stay in one place for over a long track is that they start out really well, and then somewhere about halfway or something through, they begin to not necessarily do bad things or anything like that, but it almost looks like they begin to coast.
Yeah.
And so you feel like in your heart that right now is the time to, just kind of take a break.
Yep.
But in that break, realign, just make sure that we're setting the trajectory for the next decade plus.
Right.
And
on that note, decade plus, whether I'm a part of that or not, I want to be, and my desire is for that. I want to be here as long as the Lord wants me to be here. Clarity on that, but the Lord may have other plans, and we want to be open to that. If that's what, but wherever it is, I want to be sure that I'm leading well and leading with open eyes into what that may be.
Yeah, that's good. So, the way I see the sabbatical, it's not. I don't see it as a time where you're just taking time off.
Right.
I see this as crucially important for us as a church. Whereas, people may not see you around on Sundays or anything like that. What that is providing for our church is the vision for leadership for the upcoming decades. Yeah. And if some of the leaders, in decades past had done that, the church probably would not have went through the time that it went through several years back.
Right.
And so just having the moment where you can take time to step back, because what you were saying at the beginning of this podcast is there are so many just, I hate to use the word mundane because it's not mundane, but it's the grind,
it is,
if you will. It's the same. Again, it's not the same things every week, but you get what I'm saying. There's so much stuff that just packs the schedule,
right, that
it's really hard to have what they call margin time to sit back and look at the big picture.
Right.
And I don't know if anybody is actually wondering, well, how. I think one of the questions in one of the deacons meetings were, you're getting paid that month, well, yes.
Yeah.
We can't afford not to pay you to.
I can't afford for you not to pay me.
well, that too. But we as a church can't afford to not pay you to see this through.
Yeah.
I think this is I think it could potentially be a watershed moment for our church.
Well,
when coming back into this and seeing particularly 2024 as a recalibration of sorts.
Yeah, and we're on that trajectory already, resetting bylaws and working through committees, and I'm so grateful for folks who have intentionally and intensively engaged in that process. We got a long way to go with that, but I'm encouraged by that direction because it sets the table for us to have good health long term here, and that's truly really important there. But another piece or another aspect, and to finish out that conversation about what the rest of that month looks like, I've got those middle 2 weeks, and then the last 8 to 10 days I'll be in the woods. I'm going to be walking the Bartram Trail. At least that's my plan, which is a trail that tracks the route that William Bartram, he was a naturalist from Great Britain that came over to the New World in the early 1700s, and it just tracks his journey up through that area, and it's northeast Georgia into southern North Carolina. But I'll be out really pretty thoroughly disconnected at that point. My schedule will be pretty simple: wake up, eat breakfast, pack my bag, and walk the rest of the day, and start over and do it the next day for about 8 days. But that's a lot of time for me to process not only the conversations I've had. Another intentional portion of this month is for me to do some intentional spiritual renewal, and I'm looking at some resources, some things that I'm going to engage with, just to refill my tank.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you feel like you're just pouring out of an empty cup, and so I need that time to refill that tank, and then we'll be re-entering first part of November and begin having some conversations. And I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be an interesting thing because I want to hear from the church family what that looked like for them, you know, but also to be able to communicate with them. You know, here's some of the initial thoughts that I have coming out of this, and I'm guessing. You know, of course, I don't know because this is a new endeavor, but I'm guessing probably 6 weeks after this is done, my view of it will be a little different than 6 days after.
Yeah.
Because as it percolates down and settles down into my life, we'll see what that looks like.
So, as we conclude, what are some ways that we as a church can pray for you during that time? Intentionally praying for you during that time.
Yeah, we pray that I will rest. Because it's going to take me a while to, and that's part of the reason I wanted to stay close around that first week. That may be the wrong answer, but just to, because it's going to take me a minute to just disconnect from, I need to be doing, or I got to go see, or I got to go prepare, and just to say, no, those things are off my plate for a little while. So pray that I will rest. Pray for some genuine spiritual renewal in my life. Again, I'm not disconnected from God. I don't feel distant from God. I just know that I'm dry. I'm empty. There's just that weariness, and I need that refreshment. So you can pray for that. Pray for my wife. She'll be probably filtering and fielding some things for me, and so we'll see how all that works. And we're still having some conversations about what's in bounds and what's out of bounds with that. But just pray for her during this time. But and then pray for Josh. Because
I'll take it.
And brother, I just know I'll be praying for you daily. But I would just encourage you as a church family to pray for Josh daily, because he's again, gratefully, his presence makes this a much easier ask, and gift that you're able to give to me as a pastor.
Yep. Well, it's an honor to be able to step into your shoes for a month. Yeah. I told you I was just going to clear your whole office out for a month, and
you probably need it.
No, I will remain in my office because that is too much stuff to move.
Yes, indeed.
But I think this has been a good conversation. I hope it's been helpful for everybody listening.
Yeah.
To be able to get more context, to be able to understand this more. And listen, we are open books on this. I'm sure you can agree that if anybody has any questions, they can come talk to you.
Right.
And if you want the real story behind it all, you can come ask me.
There you go. Absolutely.
I'm just kidding.
No, that's exactly right.
There's no real story to it. You got the story. So two
other things I just want to add. My prayer is that coming out of this, we will begin looking at sabbatical as a norm for ministerial staff and pastoral staff. And in fact, I've already, just so you that are listening will know, we've already broached this conversation with our deacon body. We'll be having that conversation with personnel that this is something that we need to be looking to for Josh. I mean, gosh, you've been here almost 10 years now. In January comes 10 years. And you're working on a PhD, so it would be a good moment to be able to bless you with some uninterrupted, undemanded time to focus in and get a big chunk of whatever dissertation work you need to get done at some point.
Would be great.
But, that's one that's near term, but also just looking forward to whoever else may be here in the future that's here for 5, 6, 7 years. That's a good time to say, you need to take this time to reset and think through some things and go take a rest. So anyway, just making that a part of the regular rhythm of service here. One other thing, and this is just a practical matter, I do have a blog. I don't use it very often, but I'm in the process of resurrecting it for this month.
People still blog?
Yeah, I know, but it's just going to be one of those ways, and this will be in the show notes, and it's also going to be on our church app and website, so that you can just kind of hear some of the things that I'm going through. And it's going to be kind of a twofold thing. One, there'll be some things I may want to say, directly to the church family, but also it's just going to be a place for me to kind of gather, particularly with these conversations I'll be having with those gentlemen, just a place to gather up some of those conversations and get some, some thoughts on paper digitally, so that I can preserve those things. But that'll also give you kind of a peek behind the curtain through this month, and because I want you guys, because y'all are very much a part of this, I want you to be a part of it. So that's one way that you can be.
That's good. Well, we're looking forward to hearing about it all when it's over, and not hearing about it in the middle. Well, yeah, we will be reading about it on your blog, but
sure.
we won't bother you
Right.
showing up at your doorstep at 10 o'clock at night and saying, hey.
Well, like I said, we'll work through those things too. There are some parameters that are in place for that.
Yeah. But like I said, I'm just looking forward to it, and I'm excited about what God's going to do in and through you during that time.
Amen.
And just thankful that our church is getting behind you
Absolutely.
on this.
And that was the thing I wanted to close with, was just once again to say to you as a church family, thank you, not only for the opportunity, but thank you for your enthusiastic support. So many of you have intentionally stopped me. I've even had some of you say, you should have done this a while back.
Yep.
So thank you, church family, for this opportunity to take this time of extended rest and recalibration in my life.
Yeah. Well, we did try to do it 3 years ago.
Well, that's all right.
But probably should have even done it before then. Anyways, any last thoughts outside of those?
See you in November.
All right. Thank y'all. Next podcast will be on the Apostles' Creed, so be sure to tune in to those next time.
See you.